at a certain point, for example, people decided men are going to go and hunt, women are going to look after the children. And it worked in that context, right? And at a certain point, certain people were moving from one place to the next. And so they were building temporary shelters because we're going to move when the season changes. At a certain point, with the colonial administration in many places, cities were not built for Africans, right? And so, and it was mostly the African men who had hostels that they lived in during their working time. And when it's a holiday, they travel back to the village, to their home. Things changed. Now you have the entire family, African family in the city. And certain people still insist that to be truly African, you need to have a rural home. And yet it has shifted. But then we want to maintain that culture. And it is a culture that came as a way to adapt to the context that people were in at that point. So what is African? What is not African, right? Mm-hmm. We have been part of this world for however long that it has been. And we have been the labor. I mean, there are so many documentaries that are coming up of how, for example, in the United States, Black African women were very pivotal to many of the scientific discoveries and that whole sort of thing. So I think the important thing is for us to hold lightly this idea of culture, to keep the things that work, to keep the things that we feel are useful for us going forward. Mm-hmm. But I'll give an example. As an African, if you were to call me and say that your father has passed on, of course, this was pre-COVID, right? Actually, this is a good example. Pre-COVID, if you had called me and said your father has passed on, I'm not able to raise your father from the dead, but I was going to drive to your house and sit with you in that pain, because that is how I express my condolence. That is the African way. And for all intents and purposes, that is a good way. Of course, for a different culture, calling you and sending you flowers and giving you space is their way. And that is a good way that they find to do that, right?
Yeah.
I think I prefer the African way in every aspect of it, right? Yeah. And so, but then right now in the context of COVID, when you say that, and we are all social distancing and ensuring that we curb the spread of COVID, we cannot insist that this is my African culture, therefore I will do this, right? We have to find another way that works for us. So I think that's, for me, that's one of the most important things when we think about African, because the other thing about being African is this idea that we have a culture, and culture can never change.
And most of the times, the culture, when we talk about culture, when we talk about African culture, I like the way that you used, to keep it stagnant. So I have no problem, if we developed on African culture, but we also found a way in which we would maintain, like you have said, those good things within the culture that are making us, to have an identity as Africans. But then we still have to build. Look, I'll give you a very good example, Dr. Dr. Dudu. I got to visit my mother in the village, and obviously before my father died, he built some kind of a good house for my mother. So she stays in a house that is made of iron sheets and blocks and stuff like that. But most of our neighbors, they have round houses that leak most of the times, year in and year out. Those houses, they leak because they made out of grass. They're thatched grass. Now, you and myself, as our family, sometimes we travel together. We go to I'll give you an example. We go to Sun City, or we go to one of these Sun hotels. We find grass-thatched houses.
They are more expensive.
And those grass-thatched houses are more expensive, but those grass-thatched houses have electricity, they have running water, they are made in such a way that they are habitable. Why can't we move from that leaking house and maintain it to look with grass thatch, but develop on it? What is it that causes us not to do that? I've been talking about a skin, wearing a skin. I have no problem as a Ngoni man to wear a skin, but I just don't want it to still be smelling. I want it to be nicely processed. I want it to be nicely decorated. It's a skin, but it looks good because I'm developing on my culture. But for us to maintain being an African, something must still be like from ancient times, you know?
I don't agree.
You don't agree?
I think there are many Africans. I think this is where we need to start. There are many Africans that have shifted, and yet we still continue to. So if an African is no longer doing those things or doing them in a different way, we don't recognize that as African. Somehow, African still has to go back to.
That's
to
what I am talking about. That's
right?
what I am talking about.
And so I think we all need to agree that I am African, right? Like you are African wearing a suit, I am African as I am. Because unless someone decides to take that stand, we will continue to associate African with what it was, not where it has moved to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To push it a little bit further, Dr. Dudu, so we have a lot of different leadership styles, you know, and different government systems that have been used to govern people. Do you think as Africans we need our own, or do you think that democracy is one size fits all kind of leadership and government systems? What do you think? Do you think that what we are seeing or what we are not seeing is as a result of lack of a leadership that would take us to another level? Or do you think that we are not just doing democracy well?
You ask that question, and I think of Trump in America as a perfect example of democracy, no? But anyway, we are talking about African issues.
Yeah. Let's stick to Africa.
No. But I'm mentioning that to say, for me, it's all about context, right? It's about the leadership that is needed in whatever context that we are in. So if we are to look at the African context, right, what kind of leadership do we need? And is democracy the process that will get us that kind of leadership? Or do we need to adopt the democracy to fit the African context? I watched a video recently of this woman who was talking about, she worked for the IMF at the time, and she was in the room when there was a negotiation of a loan. I'm not sure, I think it was the World Bank, and there was negotiation of a loan. And she said how angry and embarrassed she was at the way in which it was an African country, at the way in which the representatives of that government were more or less begging for that loan, not even thinking about negotiating the terms, right? And so I don't necessarily know if we need an entire new system of governance, or we just need the right leadership, and that will be aware of our context. right? Aware of the fact that, and partly in as much as it's, you can also be angry with these people that were failing to negotiate. But if we were all to be honest of what we are born into as Africans, we are born into a mentality that says white people are better than us. And so if I find myself in a room with white people, I'm absolutely thankful to be in that room. And I do not think that I have any power to negotiate or to challenge what is happening. I've been in many situations where I have realized that people are, a white person is surprised that I'm actually taking ground and speaking back, because the assumption is after looking at me, I will just tell this person instructions and they will go along with what I have to say. So it is a conditioning of our mind that we really need to be intentional about shifting and about ensuring that at least I don't know, maybe there is a future with us of finding leaders that have shifted their mind to not internalize that idea that because I am African, already there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Which is also partly why I keep on going back to challenge this idea of being African. Because I think if I walked into a boardroom and thought I am a woman and I'm going to sit at this table with 7 men, I have already engaged from a less powerful position. But if I walked into a boardroom and said I am a colleague who's going to be engaging with colleagues, and yes, research has shown that women leaders bring other qualities to their work. However, I don't think those women leaders that are bringing other qualities they initially come in with this backtracking of I am a woman, therefore I am different. They come in and say I am a colleague and at the same level with these people. And I have the extra advantage of being a woman, and there are certain things that I'll probably be better at than they are. And I think that's the same kind of mentality that we need. I don't think that if I went into every space and thought that I am African, therefore I am African, the moment I engage first by thinking I am African, I'm going to see all the disadvantages of being African.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to engage as a citizen of the world, and yes, there are so many hurdles to that. There are so many challenges for me located in Africa to be part of the world. In as much as 2020 has made us shift to a virtual world as we are doing right now, there are many people who cannot access the quality of internet that allows for this, right?
Yeah.
So yes, there are still inequalities, but if I already start off with this idea that I am African and there's so much I have to conquer before I get to be at the same level, I have defeated myself. But when I engage as a human who is on the earth, a global citizen who should have access to every part of the world, there will be hurdles, but I'm less likely to be engaging with them, because sometimes I think we actually stop ourselves before anything stops us.
Yeah.
Right?
But the idea of being African, sometimes works against us, because like you have said, your friends are starting from 1, you are starting from -10. So by the time you get to 1, your friends are really, really gone, because you are trying to fight all these things about how you look at yourself and how you feel about yourself. And sometimes what I've also discovered with a lot of us as Africans, we sometimes overcompensate with our inferiority complex. So that's why sometimes we go to extremes where when we are in a leadership position, we use the position more than we use our competencies, so that people can see that I am the boss. I like the idea of coming to the table, not with an inferior complex or a superior complex, but coming to the table to say, guys, we are coming to the table to discuss business and we are all the same. I think if we can get to that, we are going to win this battle, because I think many people, either they start negative or they start, this thing of thinking that, I am better than the next person, you know. So if I were to ask you, Dr. Dudu, what is your dream about Africa? If you were given an opportunity to make Africa what you want it to be, what would Africa look like?
Africa would be led by women.
again, that is a problem.
Why?
It should be led by people, women and men alike.
We have the Queen of Sheba, who traveled all the way from Ethiopia to meet with King Solomon. It's very biblical, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, my dream for Africa is for the return of dignity to every woman, man, and child. And by dignity, I mean when we see ourselves as fully human enough in every aspect, in every way possible. When we, you know, I have reflected on why. So, for example, in South Africa, with the xenophobic violence, what would make it so easy for someone to attack another person just because they were born in a different
country?
Place? Yes. And I think it comes back to how we see ourselves as humans. When Black lives have been made disposable, right? In every way you can think. Disposable enough not to be paid what they should be paid. Disposable enough that they can be attacked because they are foreigners. If we look at gender-based violence in our communities, and I know it's not like gender-based violence doesn't occur in every other community.
Parts of the world, yeah.
Yes. When we look at, I mean, it goes back to the way in which Black bodies can just be reported in the news without dignity. So for me, when I think about dignity, it's all these things. And it's something that starts with us. In as much as we want the world to respect us and to engage with us as equals, I think there's a lot of work that we have to do. And yes, we did not choose this mental framework that we are born into. This is the world that we have been born into, but this is the work that we have to do to undo those ideas. You know, we laugh sometimes that as kids, we used to dream of being married to a white person. It was like an amazing thing to be married to a white person. Not that you have met a white person that you love. And so I'm not saying there's anything wrong with interracial marriage, but what I'm saying is when it's an idea that I will have finally become human enough because of that alignment.
Yeah.
So that is my dream, that the sanctity of Black lives returns.
Yeah.
The dignity of us as humans, that we are made in the image of God.
Yeah.
That is my dream.
I think you really said it well, Dudu. You know, I think our biggest problem is we don't love who we are. And I think the images, history, and all the things that have happened have made our lives so disposable, like you are saying, that I think it's the commonness of poverty and the commonness of all these things that we go through as Africans, that it has made it look like life really doesn't have dignity. You know, in Africa, hundreds and hundreds of people can die, you know, and like you are saying, it's not something that is going to catch the attention of the world, let alone even our own selves, you know. And there would be 3 or 4 kids that get trapped somewhere playing in a hall somewhere in in one of the other countries, and all the big networks, TV networks will go and camp there to try and get these 4 kids that are how many. I think it will start with us. Like you have said it will start with us. If we can have dignity about life. And it also starts with a president, for example, who sees people being butchered in his own country and he can't say anything. You see what I mean? So what it is that it shows that those lives are disposable. It can happen anywhere. On the African continent, people mass murders happen on the continent, but we don't dignify our people. I like that idea of dignity, where the African life or the Black life, like they do it now, Black Life Matter, something like that. It's really going to get us back. But from my side, as we are going to just wind up this, Dr. Dudu, I get a lot of inspiration from the Bible, because I believe myself that the Bible is a very powerful book. Maybe that is why the Jewish nation is very strong, because they incorporate a lot of biblical principles in their way of life. And when I look at Psalm 78 verse 72, or is it the other way around? It says that David shepherded the people with integrity of heart and with skillful hands. I look at that as the basis for leadership. A leader must be competent to lead the people, but a leader should also have a heart for people. What I see myself with a lot of our leadership is that they don't have a heart for people. I hear a lot of news, I listen to the news where people can steal money that was meant to help sick people. Don't you think that is a serious problem in Africa,
I do. And I think part of it goes back to if I was leading people and can see and treat those people with dignity. I think it goes back to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Having a heart for leadership would be someone who's able to see the sanctity of every life.
Every life.
See the sanctity of Black people.
Yeah.
And to then be accountable to how they lead them, accountable to the resources that they are in charge of. And so I think at the end of the day, it all goes back to that. It all goes back to the fact that first off, even our state structures were never built to sanctify Black lives. They were built for the select few white people that were there, and then there were the Black people that could work and support that system. And yet we have not shifted that. We have inherited those state mechanisms and just assumed that they will translate into taking care of a greater number of people.
So the first stop is dignity. We need to bring back dignity to our people, so much so that I see that if any country touched an American, they hear that an American was attacked somewhere in the streets of Lusaka, the whole of that place, the Americans would really bomb that place because of just one American, that has been attacked there. But for us as Africans, if we can also get to a place where we dignify ourselves. But don't you think that sometimes we also work against ourselves? I heard the quote a long time ago. I was, I think, still in my 20s. I read a book by a guy called Leon Sullivan. Leon Sullivan was a pastor in the Chicago area in the United States. He said that as Africans, you know, him was an African American. He says that we need to do things that would not justify the world to despise us. You see what I mean? So if we as well, we are perpetuating things that are causing other people to look down on us, we can stand on the mountain and tell people, respect us, but we ourselves, we don't respect each other. You know,
but I think that, for me, I think that then goes back to, if you keep on seeing people drowning downstream, you go back upstream and figure out what is happening. And a lot of research has shown how, so for example, if we look in the American context currently, if we look at the conditions in which Black people live and how that primes every young person in that area to a life of crime. So sometimes, in as much as we want individuals to take responsibility, there's a part for that individual responsibility, but it's taking a lot more power for me to do the right thing and less power for me to do the wrong thing. And there's no math to it. I'm more likely to do the thing that doesn't take effort than the thing that takes effort. So I think we also need to take a step back and look at the conditions in which we as Black people are. I mean, if we go back to an example of the village where people are in huts that are dripping water and everything, what have those people been exposed to? What is it that they know? Because in as much as we want people to take responsibility, dreaming and imagining a different life does not just happen. If I look back for myself, I said both my parents were teachers. I loved education, but I remember I had cousins who used to pass through our home when they were going to university. And that is how the idea of a university was planted. And I thought, when I grow up, I want to go to university. So in as much as we want people to take responsibility for where they end up, that is part of it. But there's a greater part of it, which is about the environment and what the environment allows me to do.
Yeah.
I might have all the dreams of finishing high school, but if I'm in an informal settlement and all I can see is, for me to survive here, I need to find someone to marry me, and maybe dropping out of getting pregnant, dropping out of high school, and someone has married me is the way with the least resistance, you know?
Yeah.
So and yet we do again have stories of people that will do the impossible for them to get to where they want to be. But that shouldn't be then that we should all be these exceptional humans that have to drum up all the power we have in the world to survive.
Yeah.
It should be easy for everyone. And I think that, so I think it's a two-way thing. In as much as you are more likely to find perhaps a Black person committing crime, it's also about how has the system allowed that, how has the environment made it such that it's much more likely that that person
that's why it boils down to leadership. You know, we need to change the narrative. We need to change the way that we look at life, and we need to change the way that we look at our own people. And if we don't do that, I like that illustration, you know, if you're seeing people that are drowning coming downstream, it's better to go upstream to go. And Africa needs a lot of that upstream investigation. There's so many people drowning. Yeah, you know, I don't know. We have very few minutes, Dr. Dudu, that are remaining. I wanted you to recite your poem or to read it or whatever, if you have it there. I read it, it's beautiful. I have a friend that I have been referring you to Dr. Gugu, because there's a friend of ours, her name is Dr. Gugu. She wrote an excellent book, and I'm sure that you're going to like her book about Africa. I'll send you a link. It's a beautiful book. The whole book is a set of poems. So she has written poems about African leaders. She has done poems about Africa itself, and it's a beautiful book. So are you able to do the poem, or we can just
I'll read the poem.
Yes.
As I read the poem, I just want to say that my dream for the dignity of Africans is that we can be the ones telling our stories. And when we are telling our stories, we can choose to be the kings and queens.
That's why we're doing this program. We're telling our own story, right? I like that.
Let me tell my story. What I own in this world is the word. It creates, it destroys, it has power. Let me tell my story. Use my words. Borrow your language so you can hear, but tell my story for my children to hear. Let me tell my story. Build castles in the air, crown kings and queens, warriors, heroes, our mothers, sisters, brothers, and fathers will be. Let me tell my story. Paint a picture with my words. Heavy and light strokes, the brush will paint. Blue skies, gray clouds, black nights, and twinkling stars. Let me tell my story. Power on my tongue, trace my past, chart my path, define my name, own my life. Will you listen?
Wow, that is so beautiful, Dr. Dudu. Thank you so much. It was really great hanging out with you on African Legends. And you are a great African. And we love you, and we want you to know that the work that you are doing is going to be celebrated by many, many, many Africans. And we just pray that God will give you a very long life so that you can continue to contribute the way that you have been contributing. So I see here there's a few comments. Let me just read some comments so that you can see people have been listening to the program. Emmanuel Essien in Nigeria has been watching, and he says, you both, you look great. Actually, Dr. Gogo, the one that I was telling you about, Dr. Gogo says, indeed, very happy to join here to celebrate our African legends. There's Gideon Kapafu, pastor in Midrand. He says, Pastor Kenneth Mwale, I like the idea of praying and working for the development of our beautiful continent. Then Sarah Ngowo says, happy to be part of this awesome discussion. Dr. Gogo again, she says, this is such a powerful talk show, interesting and informative, great host and great guest. Then there's a lady, Manuku, she says, great talk, enjoying this conversation. There's somebody was watching in Zambia. He says, good initiative, where to go? Job well done. I don't know this one where they're watching from, but her name is Chikava. Winnie Chikava. It says, interesting discussion on leadership. I'm loving it. And then when you talked about Africa being led by women, she says, amen, Dr. Dudu. Africa led by women. Then Maxwell Mutanda, yeah. Then Maxwell Mutanda says that great talk. African problems needs African solutions. Root out greediness and corruption. Make a better system of Africa. We need young leaders. obviously young leaders like yourself, Dr. Dudu, you know. Yeah, and then my
I'm
beautiful
glad
wife,
to be called young.
my beautiful wife Rebecca says, great show. And then there's a friend, Madimeja Shokole, says, what a wonderful launch. Keep them coming, my leader.
Wow.
So thank you so much
for having me, Pastor Ken.
You are welcome.
I'm absolutely proud that I can call you my friend.
Okay.
And, in as much as you are celebrating African legend, I think you are one of the most amazing Africans that anyone can ever meet.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I received that.
It's the truth, though.
Thank you. So next week we are going to have Robert Hanja Hanja. Robert Hanja Hanja will be coming out of Lagos, Nigeria, but he is an African from Malawi, and he works all over. You know, he has worked all over the African continent, and he is an engineer in the water sector. You know, he's dealing with water. So today we were dealing with somebody in the migration sector or migration discipline. Next week we are going to be looking at development, you know, water and all these other important things as an engineer. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and we give thumbs up to Dr. Dudu, and those vets students are in good hands to have a clever woman like yourself. Yes, so God bless you, and we will continue to celebrate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.